Sometimes, it's the smallest of sounds that change everything. Late at night, when the world is still and the streets are empty, the quiet can feel overwhelming, like time itself has frozen. The kind of night where nothing seems to stir and every shadow feels deeper than it should. The only noise is the occasional rustle of wind or the distant chirp of a lone cricket. Everything feels at peace, yet the stillness is unsettling, as if the world is holding its breath. On nights like these, everything seems too quiet, too calm, until a sound breaks through the silence, a tiny cry. It's so soft at first, barely noticeable, that it could easily be missed, especially amidst the vast quiet. But if you listen carefully, it's there, a small, desperate sound that seems to echo through the empty streets. It's faint, but full of fear, pulling at the very heart of the night. There's something in that cry that feels urgent, something that seems to plead for attention. It's as though the darkness itself is trying to hide it, but the sound refuses to be ignored. The world might be still, but this cry will not let the silence linger. In that silence, Lily was walking home, just like anyone else. It was the kind of night where nothing out of the ordinary seemed likely. Everything was predictable, routine. Lily had left work late and was simply trying to get home, her thoughts drifting, her pace steady but relaxed. Her footsteps echoed softly in the quiet, and the only company she had was the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. She pulled her jacket tighter around her as the night grew colder, unaware that this seemingly ordinary evening was about to take a sharp turn. As she walked, the sound reached her. A faint cry, just barely audible at first. It didn't sound like much, but it made her pause. She stopped for a moment, listening, trying to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. Was it a bird? A dog? It was too small to be a person, surely. But it wasn't a regular part of the night's usual hum. This was different. The cry cut through the stillness with a distinct edge of distress, the kind of sound you can't ignore, the kind that catches at your chest and makes your heart skip a beat. Lily turned, trying to locate the source. The night was dark, the street lamps casting long shadows, but there was something about that sound. It was almost like it was calling out to her, begging her to find its source. The world around her seemed to hold its breath as the cry grew just a little louder, sharper. It was almost as if the wind itself was carrying it to her, weaving through the empty street, carrying a message of need. She looked down the street, into the alleyways, but all she saw were empty roads and closed storefronts. Still, that cry persisted, urging her on. It was a soft cry, almost a whisper, yet it carried an undeniable sense of urgency. Lily's curiosity was piqued, but now there was something else, concern. What could it be? Where was it coming from? Her heart raced as she started walking toward the sound, the faint cry growing just a little louder with each step. She felt her steps quicken as she drew closer. The quietness around her felt even more pronounced now, as if the whole world was waiting to see what she would do. What could be so desperate? What was in need of help? The cry seemed to fill the night air, growing clearer with every step she took. Lily's instincts kicked in. She had to know. Her mind raced. Was it an injured animal? A child in danger? What was it? The noise tugged at her with a force she couldn't ignore. Her breath became more focused, her pace quickening. She wasn't sure what she would find, but she knew she had to keep going. Something about that sound, so fragile and pleading, made her unable to turn back. The further she went down the quiet, dark street, the louder the cry became. It was now unmistakable, filled with so much raw emotion that it was impossible to ignore. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random sound in the night. It felt like a call for help, a cry that needed to be answered. The night felt darker around her, and the quiet seemed to press in, making each step feel heavier. But she pushed forward. The cry had led her this far. She had to see it through. As she turned a corner, Lily saw it. There, in the shadows, something small, huddled, and vulnerable was crouching near the base of a dumpster, barely visible in the dim light. It was shaking, its eyes wide with fear. She stepped closer, her heart pounding as she realized what she was looking at. A tiny black kitten, alone, cold, terrified. Its wide eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. The cry that had been tugging at her all night was coming from this tiny creature, lost in the dark, begging for help. What had it gone through? Why was it here, alone in the shadows. Lily's heart skipped a beat. She crouched down slowly, her voice gentle as she reached out. "Hey there, little one," she murmured softly, trying to reassure the kitten, who was still trembling in fear. The tiny creature seemed to hesitate, but then it took a small, tentative step toward her, trusting the warmth of her voice. The relief was palpable in the air, like the tension from the night was finally starting to dissipate. Lily gently scooped the kitten up, holding it carefully in her arms, as she stood up and took in the small creature's fragile state. She knew this was just the beginning, but what would happen next? Would this little kitten survive the night? The answer was only just beginning to unfold. As Lily cradled the tiny kitten in her arms, she could feel the coldness of its fur, the trembling of its small body against hers. It was weak, and for a moment she wasn't sure if it could even hold on. But in her arms, it was safe, at least for now. She looked around the dark street, the silence pressing in once more. The city, usually so full of noise, now seemed distant, like a faraway world. It was just her and the kitten, connected by that single fragile thread of life. Lily's first thought was to get the kitten somewhere warm, somewhere safe. She couldn't bear to think of it staying out here alone in the cold. She glanced around, noticing a small coffee shop just a few doors down, still dimly lit by the glow of the windows. Without hesitation, she started walking toward it, holding the kitten close. She whispered softly to the tiny creature, reassuring it, though she wasn't sure if it could understand. The kitten, still trembling in her arms, seemed to relax slightly as it nestled deeper into the warmth of her jacket. When Lily entered the shop, the warm light and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a stark contrast to the cold night outside. The barista, still cleaning up for the night, looked up at her with a curious expression. But when she saw the kitten in Lily's arms, her face softened with concern. "Oh my goodness," the barista said, quickly approaching. "Is it okay?" Lily nodded, her voice quiet but steady. "I found it outside, in an alley. It was all alone, just crying out. I think it's been out here for a while." The barista moved quickly to grab a towel and a small blanket. "I'll get some water and food for it. You're a lifesaver for bringing it in here. It's lucky you found it." Lily gently set the kitten down on the towel, and the barista hurried to the back, returning with a small bowl of water and some soft food. The kitten, still cautious but hungry, began to nibble at the food, its tiny paws reaching out as it drank. For the first time, Lily saw a small spark of hope in its eyes. It was surviving, against all odds. They sat together for a while, Lily and the barista watching as the kitten began to regain some strength, its body still weak but no longer trembling as much. It was hard to imagine that such a small, fragile creature could have endured so much, and yet there it was alive, against all odds. Lily's phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her friend, who had been expecting her earlier that night. She quickly typed a response, letting them know that she had found a kitten and would be home soon. She glanced down at the small creature in front of her, realizing just how much of an impact this night had already made. As the kitten finished eating, it curled up on the towel, finally starting to relax. It was safe, it was warm, and for the first time in who knew how long, it wasn't alone. Lily couldn't help but smile softly, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "This little one is going to be okay," she whispered softly to the kitten, almost as if speaking to herself. "You're going to be okay." The barista, having finished cleaning up, smiled and nodded. It's amazing how one small act of kindness can change everything. Lily glanced back at the kitten, who was now peacefully asleep, its tiny chest rising and falling gently. She knew that, in some way, the kitten had saved her as much as she had saved it. There was something deeply powerful about being part of that miracle, a tiny, desperate cry that led her to a tiny, fragile life, and now that life would have a chance. As Lily stood to leave, she glanced one last time at the kitten, her heart full. It wasn't just the kitten that had been saved. It was the bond that had formed in those quiet moments, in the stillness of the night. The world felt a little smaller, a little kinder, in that moment. And as she stepped back into the cold night, she knew that the journey wasn't over for either of them. The kitten had found its way into her heart, and in return, Lily had found something she hadn't known she needed. A reminder that sometimes the smallest cry in the dark can lead to the biggest change in our lives. As Lily walked home that night, the kitten safely nestled in her arms. The world around her seemed different. The dark streets, the quiet neighborhoods, everything felt more alive, more meaningful. She looked down at the tiny creature in her arms, still fast asleep, its soft, rhythmic breathing filling the silence between them. The weight of the kitten's small body against hers felt like a promise, one that would change both of their lives forever. When Lily reached her apartment, she carefully set the kitten down on the soft, warm couch she had in her living room. She had been living alone for a while now, and the space always felt too quiet, too empty. But tonight, with the tiny life in her care, the apartment felt fuller, more alive than it had in months. She watched as the kitten stirred slightly, stretching its little limbs, still cautious but now safe in this new environment. Lily moved around the room, preparing a small bed for the kitten in a soft basket, lining it with warm blankets she had tucked away in a closet. She glanced back at the little creature, now slowly waking up and blinking at the unfamiliar surroundings. Its wide eyes met hers, and in that moment she felt a deep connection. This tiny soul was trusting her, completely. It was a moment of vulnerability, but also one of profound trust. She gently coaxed the kitten into the basket, softly stroking its fur as it settled into its new bed. The kitten curled up, its tiny body snuggling into the warmth, finally finding comfort after the long night. As it began to purr, Lily couldn't help but smile, her heart full of emotions she hadn't expected. She felt grateful for the chance to give this kitten a second chance at life, just as she had been given a chance to feel something she hadn't realized she was missing. The next few days were filled with the sounds of soft purring and the gentle scampering of tiny paws. Lily had named the kitten Midnight, after the dark, quiet night she had found it. She took Midnight to the vet, where the doctor confirmed that despite being undernourished and weak, the kitten was healthy and would fully recover with the right care. The news filled Lily with relief, and as she took Midnight home, she couldn't help but think of how far they had come. From that tiny cry in the dark to this moment, when Midnight was safe, fed, and surrounded by love. Over the following weeks, Midnight began to grow stronger. It started playing with the small toys Lily bought, chasing after the strings, tumbling and pouncing with all the energy of a kitten. Lily would watch with a smile on her face, delighted by every small victory the kitten achieved. It was no longer just surviving, it was thriving. But as Midnight's health improved, Lily noticed something else. Something that surprised her even more than the kitten's recovery. She was healing too. She found herself laughing more, enjoying the simple things in life and feeling less lonely. Midnight had brought something back into her life that she hadn't realized was missing: joy, connection, and purpose. One afternoon, as Lily sat on the couch, Midnight curled up beside her. She reflected on how much had changed since that quiet night. It was amazing how a single moment, a small unnoticed cry, could alter the course of someone's life. Midnight had been the catalyst for change, but it wasn't just the kitten that had been saved. In taking care of Midnight, Lily had found a new sense of belonging, a new reason to wake up each day with hope. The bond between them had grown deeper than she could have imagined, and now, as Midnight napped contentedly at her side, Lily couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. This little kitten, once lost and alone, had changed her world in ways she couldn't have predicted, and she knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. Sometimes, all it takes is one small, desperate cry in the dark to turn everything around. A life, once fragile and uncertain, can blossom into something full of hope and possibility. And for Lily and Midnight, the journey had just begun. They had both found something they never knew they were looking for: each other. As the days turned into weeks, Lily's life began to take on a rhythm. Every morning, she'd wake up to the soft sound of Midnight's tiny paws scampering around her apartment. The kitten had grown more playful, more confident, and Lily was there for every small milestone, every new thing Midnight discovered. She would laugh as Midnight pounced at shadows, chased toys, and curiously explored every corner of the apartment. It was clear that Midnight was no longer the scared, fragile kitten Lily had found that night. It had blossomed into a joyful, energetic little companion. But it wasn't just Midnight who had changed. Lily, too, had begun to feel more like herself again. The loneliness that had once defined her days was now a distant memory, replaced by the warmth of the kitten's presence. It was amazing how a tiny creature could bring so much light into her life. Midnight's playful antics, the way it would curl up next to her on the couch, purring contentedly, it had become the heart of her home, her constant source of comfort. One evening, as Lily sat at her desk, working on some paperwork, she could hear Midnight meowing from the other room. The kitten had a habit of getting into everything, always curious about what Lily was up to. With a small smile, Lily walked over to check on her, expecting to find Midnight tangled in something or pawing at her books. But instead, she found the kitten sitting by the window, staring out into the night as though waiting for something. Lily knelt down beside her, watching as Midnight's eyes followed the movement of something outside. For a moment, it seemed like the world had fallen away, the two of them lost in their quiet moment. The moonlight cast soft shadows across the room, and the only sound was the gentle purring of Midnight, content in the stillness. It struck Lily then how much Midnight had come to mean to her. She realized she no longer thought of the kitten as just an animal she had rescued. Midnight was family now, a true companion. Lily had found something in this tiny creature that she hadn't realized she was searching for. Love, connection, and the simple joy of having someone to care for. Midnight wasn't just a kitten. She was the light in Lily's life, her reason to smile on the hardest days. But Lily's thoughts weren't the only ones filling the room. Midnight, as if sensing her reflection, suddenly turned and nuzzled into Lily's hand, her purring growing louder, a small but powerful reminder of how far they had come together. Lily gently stroked Midnight's soft fur, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. There was something about this bond that felt destined, like they were meant to find each other that night, meant to give each other the second chance they both needed. Weeks passed, and Lily found herself sharing more of her life with Midnight. She took the kitten on trips to the park, where Midnight would curiously bat at blades of grass or chase after fallen leaves. She spent weekends curled up with the kitten on the couch, watching movies or reading, the two of them in perfect harmony. It wasn't a life filled with grand adventures, but it was full of quiet moments. Moments that, when strung together, meant everything. But as Midnight grew stronger, Lily began to notice something else. The kitten was becoming more independent. She would spend time exploring the apartment on her own, climbing to new heights and stretching her boundaries. Lily watched with pride as Midnight became more confident, more self-assured. And though it filled her with a quiet sadness to see the little kitten growing up so quickly, Lily knew that this was a sign of just how far Midnight had come. One day, as Lily sat at the window, looking out at the world beyond, she thought about the tiny cry she had heard that night. The cry that had led her to this beautiful, unexpected chapter in her life. The moment seemed so far away now, but it had changed everything. That night, Midnight had been just a tiny, vulnerable kitten in need of help, but now, Midnight was a strong, healthy little cat with a bright future ahead. Lily smiled softly, her heart full. "We both got a second chance," she whispered to Midnight, who was now curled up in her lap, content and safe. It wasn't just Midnight who had been saved that night. Lily had been saved too, saved from the loneliness that had once consumed her, saved by the love and joy this tiny kitten had brought into her life. As the night settled in around them, Lily knew one thing for sure. Their journey together was only just beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a team. Together, they had already overcome so much, and there was no doubt in her mind that they would continue to grow, to learn, and to love. Because sometimes, all it takes is one small cry in the dark to bring two souls together, to change everything, and to create a bond that would last a lifetime. It had been several months since that fateful night when Lily had found Midnight, and it was incredible how much had changed in such a short time. Midnight, now a healthy and curious little cat, had grown into her personality, adventurous, playful, and full of mischief. Lily often found herself laughing at the kitten's antics, whether it was chasing her own tail or attempting and failing to jump onto high shelves. She had a way of making Lily's apartment feel like a home, filling the space with energy, love, and endless joy. Yet despite Midnight's growing independence and playful nature, there was a deep, quiet bond between them. Whenever Lily was feeling down or had a tough day, Midnight would always sense it. The kitten would curl up next to her, purring softly, as though offering comfort in the simplest way possible. It was these small moments that Lily treasured the most. Those quiet, unspoken exchanges that spoke volumes more than words ever could. One rainy afternoon, as Lily sat at her desk working on some notes for her job, she heard the soft tapping of paws against the floor. She glanced up to see Midnight standing by the door, her eyes wide with curiosity, tail flicking as she looked back at Lily, almost as if asking, "What's next?" Lily chuckled, setting her pen down. "What are you up to now, huh?" she asked softly, making her way to the door. The rain outside pattered against the windows, a soothing sound that always made Lily feel cozy and calm. She opened the door, and as she did, Midnight darted out, running down the hallway with her playful speed. Lily stood there for a moment, watching as Midnight stopped at the edge of the corridor, her small body silhouetted by the soft light of the hallway. Lily smiled. "You're such a handful," she said, but her voice was full of affection. She walked after Midnight, who led the way as if she knew exactly where she wanted to go. They took a leisurely stroll through the building, Lily feeling at peace as she walked alongside Midnight. The hallway was quiet, save for the soft tapping of Midnight's paws. It was moments like this that Lily cherished the most. No rush, no stress, just the two of them enjoying each other's company. Midnight's playful curiosity led them to the stairwell, and the kitten, always a ball of energy, began bounding up the steps. Lily laughed and followed, unable to resist the kitten's infectious joy. As they reached the top of the stairs, Midnight paused and sat at the edge, staring down the hallway. Lily joined her, sitting beside the kitten, as the two of them gazed out into the stillness of the building. It was a small moment, but it felt so meaningful. A moment where the world outside faded away, and it was just them, together. "Look at you," Lily said, her voice full of warmth. "You're growing up so fast." She reached down and gently scratched Midnight behind the ears, the kitten purring in contentment. "I'm proud of you." Midnight glanced up at her, blinking slowly as if acknowledging her words. Then, as if making up her mind, the kitten darted off again, this time toward the open window. Lily followed, a soft chuckle escaping her lips as she watched the kitten hop onto the windowsill, looking out at the world beyond. The city had changed since that night, no longer just a place of routine, but a place of new beginnings, new chances. Lily had changed too. She wasn't the same person who had walked home alone that night. She was stronger now, more open, more willing to embrace the unexpected. And in the same way, Midnight had transformed from a scared, fragile kitten into a lively, confident cat, ready to face whatever came next. Lily realized then that Midnight's rescue had been more than just about saving a life. It had been about finding a new purpose, a new way of living. Together, they had shared their journeys, with Midnight teaching Lily the importance of patience, love, and the joy of living in the moment. The rain had stopped by the time they returned home, and the air was still, quiet, almost peaceful. Lily and Midnight settled on the couch, the kitten curling up on Lily's lap as the soft glow of the evening light filled the room. For the first time in a long while, Lily felt completely content, knowing that whatever the future held, she wouldn't be facing it alone. "You're my little miracle," Lily whispered to the kitten, who looked up at her with wide eyes, her purring soft and steady. "I never could have imagined that one night, one small cry could lead me here. But I'm so glad it did." As Midnight's eyes closed and she drifted off to sleep, Lily leaned back into the cushions, feeling a deep sense of peace. It was amazing to think that a single moment, the cry of a kitten in the dark, had changed everything. And now, as the two of them settled into the quiet night, Lily knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Because in the end, sometimes it only takes a tiny cry in the dark to save a life, and to create a bond that would last forever. Have you ever experienced a moment where a tiny act of kindness changed your life or someone else's? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this one.